I'd like to call the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School Board public hearing to order at 6:31. I'd like to quickly go over, I'm going to do a quick introduction. I'm Holly Derlo Babcock. I'm the chairperson of the Co-op School Board. We are expecting other members. I'm sure they're on their way, but I'd like you to go around and just introduce yourselves, please.
And I'm Melanie LeBake, school board member.
Mr. Whalen?
Bob Thompson, Assistant Superintendent for Student Services.
Gina Bergstog, Assistant Superintendent.
I already did me.
Cindy Van Conant, school board.
Thank you. I'm just going to quickly review the rules for tonight's meeting. Tonight, we are only addressing the topic of apportionment. Once we've completed the topic of apportionment, we will close the public hearing and adjourn the meeting. Speakers will be recognized by the board chair. Speakers should state their name and address for the record. You're allowed to speak for 2 minutes. A speaker may be recognized to speak again on the issue after all others have had an opportunity to speak once. If your point has been substantially made by others, please be brief. Comments and questions should be addressed to the chair or assistant superintendent. We're not going to engage in debate with other members of the public, and also it's not going to be a question and answer period. If you have questions, we'll keep track of them and answer them at a later time. Input will be restricted to Hollis Brookline residents of voting age. Exceptions will be made for administration and others to answer some questions. I ask that you turn off your electronic devices or set them to silent mode. I'm going to do that with mine right now, and to remain respectful. Thank you. The first thing I'm going to do is quickly do a quick, brief presentation on apportionment for those who maybe are not aware of how and what the formula is. This is not a very detailed presentation. It is a simple, basic presentation on apportionment. We are expecting to provide a more detailed, analytical presentation at the special meeting on January 29th. We wanted to put this together, and we wanted to present this to the voters on the 29th. The hearing is obviously by RSA. We had to be here to do this, and this is an opportunity for us to hear back from you. But we're really hoping to hear from the voters as well on the 29th. So just quickly, some of the background for the co-op. Obviously, the co-op school district was formed in 1991. It was formed by a signed article of agreement by both towns, and the purpose was to build a high school, offer outstanding academic, arts, and athletic programs. And we believe that's what we do. So, apportionment. For those of you who don't know, apportionment is the formula that is used to determine how to share the cost between the two towns of Hollis and Brookline for the co-op school district. It is set by a simple majority vote at either an annual district meeting or in this case, hopefully at the special district meeting. And once a change happens in the apportionment formula, that change is adopted. That formula is then set for 5 years, and we call that a repose. So, there are a few things that we use to create a formula. Just for those of you who are new to this, one of the things is the average daily membership, which we'll be referring to as ADM tonight. That is a daily attendance record of the pupils averaged over 1 year, and those numbers are given to us by the state. Equalized valuation is also given to us by the state, and that's the state's valuation adjusted by a ratio of a total assessed value for properties in a community to those properties' true market value. And later on in the presentation, you will see what the numbers are for this year. And the tax effort is the dollars raised by property tax. So how does apportionment work? Very simply, we have a Hollis Cooperative School District budget. 68% of our budget is made up of the operating expenses for the high school, 32% for the middle school. That total is put in through the apportionment formula. A portion of that is given to Hollis as their tax effort. The other portion is given to Brookline. And then after we do the apportionment, we take state aid out, and that's an independent process. So, the co-op school board is recommending a change to the current formula. The current formula is in black, and the green, which doesn't really show up very well, is the new change. So, the co-op current formula, which has been in place for 5 years, is 95% ADM, 5% EV on the operating budget. I'll explain that in a little bit. and 100% EV on capital costs or capital debt, really. We're suggesting an additional dollar be placed on the Hollis tax effort beginning in the fiscal year of 2021. And if this were to pass, it would continue for 5 years. How did we come up with this? It was determined by the school board that it was time to really talk about apportionment and to bring it to the floor, of the voters, since it's been 5 years. And so we started by having a joint meeting of the school board and the co-op budget committee. And after that meeting, this is the recommendation that came out of that. In December, the school board voted to approve this recommendation in a 6-1 vote. And then we voted to have the meeting. So why add the dollar? So when you add the dollar, if we pass this, the vote on the change to the current formula resets the clock on the 5-year repos. Back in 2014, 2015, there was a year-long apportionment committee. They spent a year researching the formula, researching and breaking down many, many different options. That committee was made up of school board members from the co-op school board. It was made up of budget committee members from both the Hollis Cooperative Budget Committee, Hollis Brookline Cooperative Budget Committee, and the Hollis Budget Committee, and the Brookline Finance Committee, as well as selectmen, community members. So there were a lot of different people. I think there were over 14, maybe 16 members of the community that worked for a year to develop that formula. And they proposed the current formula. This came out of that committee. Since 2015, ADM and EV has remained stable. There really hasn't been a major shift in that. Probably prior, during the 2013 to 2015 period, we had seen a big shift. And so it seemed at that time, back in 2015, the public really requested that we make a change from the prior formula. And so that's what happened through that committee process. And to be honest, the last 5 years, things have remained pretty stable, and the board has felt that adding a dollar maintains our current formula with a small change. And just as a reminder, for those of you who were at that meeting on January 12, 2015, the current formula was supported by a 672 yes, 351 no vote. And there were alternatives provided, and none of those were able to be passed. So here's where I try to explain the apportionment formula, and I'm going to do my best, okay? I have typed it up. There are basically two components of this formula, but one of those components has two parts. First, we will look at the component of the apportionment formula that is addressed by addresses capital debt. This could be bonds. It could also be municipal leases or loans. This component of the budget is apportioned based on a ratio that is based on 100% EV, equalized value. The rationale for this is that capital debt and capital expenses are improvements on the buildings and properties. And since these facilities are located in Hollis, the committee at the time recommended that equalized value would be used for this portion of the budget simply due to the fact that there was a thought that Hollis benefits from the convenience and possibly increased property value of having schools in their town. The second component of the formula is broken into two pieces based on the operating budget less the debt. So when determining the 95.5, and you'll see the bottom in the little red box is the 95.5. When we are determining the 95.5 component of the apportionment formula, the original committee used the rationale that approximately 10% of the operating budget is driven by non-programmatic costs, things that we have to pay for whether we have 100 kids or 1,000 kids in the building. And they also felt that approximately 90% of the budget is driven by how many students are being served, or the programmatic costs. The research that was done back in 2015, and it was determined that approximately a 90-10 split was the way to go. So the recommendation was that this 10% part of the operating budget should be apportioned based on an equal division of ADM and EV, which gives us our 5% EV on the operating budget. And the committee felt that 90% of that, because it's all about the kids in the building, should be apportioned based on ADM, because that's the driver of that component of the budget. So we end up with an operating budget being portioned based on a ratio that is 95% based on the ADM, kids in the building, and 5% based on EV. That's our formula, plus $1. So the change to the formula is that we'll be adding $1 before we apportion it to, is that right? No, after apportionment. So we'll be adding $1 on the Hollis tax after taking $1 from Brookline and putting it to Hollis. That's the change. So our proposed apportionment formula, how does it work out? What does it look like? It's pretty basic. After all that complicated stuff, we have a 51% of the population of our school, the ADM, excuse me, is from Hollis, 49% from Brookline. In terms of equalized value, Hollis holds 69% of that, Brookline holds 31%. When we apportion per town before state aid, Hollis is paying 53%, and Brookline is paying 47%. When we apportion after state aid, when we look at what is happening after state aid, we're at 55-45. 55 on the Hollis side, 45 on the Brookline side. I'm not here to advocate, I'm here to just kind of explain it, but it is, in a sense, and has always been, a compromise. There are people unhappy on both sides of this fence, and there are people happy, hopefully the kids. This is the Warrant article, and you have it in front of you. I just want to explain something because it's a little confusing. It's Warrant Article 1 on the warrant, but it is an amendment to Article 5 in the bylaws, which is why you see Article 1 and Article 5. And I guess I will read it. The warrant article is to see if the school district will vote to amend the Articles of Agreement of the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District as follows. Article 5, the operating expenses excluding principal and interest payments on bonds of the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District payable in each fiscal year shall be apportioned based on average daily membership, ADM, and equalized valuation according to the table below. ADM weight would be 95%, EV weight would be 5%. The expenses related to principal and interest of bonds current and future of the Hollis Brookline Cooperative School District payable in each fiscal year shall be apportioned based on average daily membership, ADM, and equalized value, EV, according to the table below. ADM weight 0, EV weight 100%. Amendment adds, after the calculations are made as set forth above, an additional amount of $1 will be assessed to Hollis prior to apportionment. So that's what's in the warrant. And finally, I'm going to leave this up there, but we do have a special district meeting where we get to vote on this, and that will be on January 29th. Hopefully, we will have good weather at 7 p.m. That is what it's noticed as. That is what it's noticed as in the Hollis Brookline High School Gymnasium. Snow date will be January 30th. So. At this point, hi, how are you? I'm going to open the floor for public comment. Again, please keep your comments to 2 minutes, and please state your name and your address for the record. The board will be taking notes, and there are minutes being taken by our secretary through the camera. Okay. Are there any comments? I see all of your faces.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Pete D'Agostino, 9 Lewis Drive, Brookline.
Welcome.
Thank you. I figured since no one jumped up, I would kick it off here.
Great, thanks.
5 years ago, this issue divided our community, tested our friendships, and significantly impacted our families. It was my first time dealing with the subject of apportionment. I was listening and learning. Every point and counterpoint seemed reasonable. Even then, I struggled to find what I thought could be a fair proposal. As apportionment came back up this time, I watched the meetings, listened to the discussion, and again struggled to find a fair solution. I sat down to try and understand the numbers, the impacts, and figure out what fair really meant. I talked to people, asked questions, and every time I thought I had a new idea that might be fair, there was a reasonable counterpoint. Then I realized it is not the answer that is the problem. It is the question that we're asking. All the discussion seemed to center around what was fair from the perspective of the town. And it struck me, and I said to my wife, towns don't send kids to schools, families do. And that's when I started over. The whole reason we haven't been able to get a fair solution is because we had, in my opinion, the wrong perspective, and we were asking the wrong question. That was never about what was fair. This was never about what was fair for the town or the co-op. The variables are too many, and the priorities are nearly impossible to line up. The question I started to ask myself was, if family sends kids to school, how do we make it fair for families? To that end, I came up with an idea. The idea is to adjust the formula in such a way that the median homes for each town incur the same tax burden. Taking everything into consideration, to include aid, and actually level the tax burden at the median home value. Admittedly, I'm not sure it's even mechanically possible. I don't have the benefit of the Excel before tonight, although it appears on the face of it that it is possible. After many conversations and some really good feedback, I think it is worth the effort to explore it. I'm asking that the co-op, school board, and the budget committee assist me in doing a calculation that levels the tax burden at the median home value for each town. Once we determine what it would take to do it, we can then assess whether or not it's a valid approach. I would then plan to come back before the board on the 15th, if you would so have me, and put me on the agenda, and present my findings to the board at that time. So that is my proposal. I've done the math. I want to, I'm not going to put out numbers, but you'd be surprised it moves the number very little for each town, but it does level the median home tax burden, which I think will really help this district be able to make good decisions for our children based on a similar impact at a similar financial level. So that's my proposal, and if you would entertain that, I would like to come back before you on the 15th.
The 15th, the 22nd is our next meeting, yeah, it's not the 15th, it's the 22nd.
Okay, your next meeting. I thought it was,
Yeah.
I apologize, I thought it was the
I think
15th.
it was wrong.
So my suggestion would be for you to put in your email some of your ideas and thoughts.
Yep.
And I will let you know whether this is going, this special district meeting is coming
Right,
up.
got it.
So whatever you suggest to us at a board meeting isn't going to change what's going to happen on the 29th. This will be
Right.
presented. So, but, I'm happy to see what you're thinking, and we can kind of look at it.
Right, I understand, because certainly this can't change, but I would like to present it to the school board and for the board to consider if it's valid. It may not be. I acknowledge that. But if it's a valid approach and it's a reasonable approach, I would ask the board at that time to consider proposing an amendment at the meeting, which is well within your purview. So
It's also within the purview of voters to propose amendments
Sure.
as well. So
Right.
if you could just offline possibly send an email to the school board with some of with it more fleshed out.
Right.
That would be,
Well, I'll need to work with the budget committee to get those finalized calculations. So I've initiated that outreach, and hopefully I'll be able to get that accomplished before your next meeting.
okay.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm Tom Guillen from Broad Street in Hollis. I have a lot of numbers. I'm going to try to stay within the 2 minutes. I would urge the board and all Hollis Brookline voters to adopt the formula that we had up till 5 years ago, which is allocating all costs based 100% on average daily membership. The change that was shown in the brief presentation was not a small tweak. That sent $1,599,674 from Brookline to Hollis over the past 5 years. The numbers are really, and to the prior speaker, I'm not going to make an attempt at what fair is because everybody has a different interpretation. But the numbers are quite astonishing. It's important in terms of context to think about how the towns have changed over the course of the co-op. Brookline has had the second highest growth rate among 234 municipalities since the co-op was founded. A lot of young, affluent families have moved here to take advantage of the co-op, and in particular, they've moved to Brookline. And that has driven these costs higher. And I think it's reasonable to think that each town pay their share. And again, that's fraught with difficulty because everybody has a different interpretation. It's like fair, what's your share? But in terms of context, again, there was a suggestion that the median household bear the same tax burden. Well, I'll change that a little bit. The typical household between the two towns, Brookline has 36% more children per household than Hollis. And as such, each household consumes 36% more educational services. I talked about the shift. I've used census data that's posted on the SAU website, information from the State Department of Revenue Administration and the Department of Education, and modeled what the impacts are on the town. In the coming year, fiscal year 2021, Hollis will pay $3.55 million more in taxes than Brookline will. That works out to $4,000 more property tax per student in Hollis than is paid in Brookline. A significant driver of that difference is state aid. Brookline will receive 44% more aid than Hollis, $1.65 million. That works out to $3,100 per student more in Brookline than Hollis. So my recommendation in summary is simply to go back to the 100% IDM. I think that best reflects it. As was mentioned at the outset and other speakers, this topic is fraught with contention. I'm not trying to make a fair assessment, but when I look at these numbers being so misaligned in terms of the responsibility for taxpayers, I think that it's appropriate that this formula be shifted back. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any other speakers? Going once? Okay. So, at this point, I'd like to close the public hearing. Thank you very much for coming. It is, I can't read my watch, 6:52. Thank you. Hmm?